questions, the new one's only 45. So it took off 15 questions, and your time goes down to 50 minutes. So you have a little over a minute per question, so a little more time allowed on it. They have it kind of broken down into topics. So, if you know that you never had statistics, that's not a big chunk on this test. Numbers and quantity, that's just the ones that you can usually use your calculator for. That's a small portion. Algebra, functions, geometry, we are going to hit that a lot. Statistics, there's some, but that altogether accounts for roughly like 60% of the test. The word problems are all integrated with other questions, so it's not just a set number of word problems. It's just throughout, they use the word problems to assess these other ideas. Just kind of a information piece. Of those 45 questions, 4 of them will not be scored. They are field test questions that they are using for future versions, but they're not just at the end. They're sprinkled throughout. So your score would be based off the 41 questions. On the ACT Math, they don't give you any formulas, but they do let you bring in a calculator. So whatever you're most familiar with, that's the calculator you should use. The graphing calculators obviously have the most capability, and the ones I have are legal for the ACT, so you can use them. But if you're not comfortable using a graphing calculator, don't. Okay, if you know that you are more efficient with another type, then definitely you're free to use that. But my suggestion, use a graphing one. We'll try to practice with those just because there's so much more they can do for you. A big thing, don't make mistakes on those easy questions because you're relying on your calculator. A question like this, you would be amazed how many people miss this question because they're plugging things in their calculator and they make a mistake. What would I have to do if I wanted to find this?
3 parentheses, -1, close parentheses, squared, plus 5.
You really need to be careful when you put in negatives. My suggestion is always put parentheses around anything that you're plugging in. And that way you're not making that mistake. Because if people don't use parentheses and they square the negative, the calculator tells them it's still negative. And that's really not the case. All right, plug that in. Everybody tell me what you get.
-9.
The more parentheses you can use, the better usually.
Yeah.
As many as you could possibly put in there.
As long as you don't forget to close one or something. But yeah, parentheses are your friend. Anytime you're plugging something in, put it in parentheses. That will save you a lot of easy points there. All right, did everyone get that when they plugged it in? Something else we talked about with the math as we were going through it before, it gets harder as you go, in theory, right? What I think is hard and what you think is hard, that's going to vary between us a little bit. So in general, those more difficult questions are at the end. So kind of keep in mind what kind of score you want. If you're aiming for a 20, do you have to get all 45 questions right? No. So focus your time on those questions at the beginning. If you're trying to get a 35, do you need to get them all right? Yeah, so you should be going through those first questions pretty quickly to give yourself more time on the harder questions. So those are your personal strategies. You kind of have to know what your target score is to decide what kind of strategy you need. Do you need to go fast at the beginning because you're trying to get everything right, or are you trying to get a score that would allow you to miss some questions? And if so, slow down and make sure you're not missing questions that you know the answer to. That idea, a little over a minute a question. If you're trying to get through all the questions, that's probably, you can't pace yourself like that because those ending questions are going to take more than a minute to solve. So kind of keep that in mind. Process of elimination is still a great strategy. Letter of the day. Do you remember what I mean by that? Letter of the day. So if you don't know an answer, pick a letter. And that's going to be the letter you choose every time. It is better than just picking a different letter on every question. Statistically, you're more likely to get it right just by picking B on every question you don't know than alternating letters. Another nice thing, the math test is going to 4 answer choices per question instead of 5. So that will save you time on those questions where you're plugging the answers into the problem. That's one less answer to work from. All right, take a second. Read this question. See? Does everybody agree with that? See? Okay. Let's say you're taking this and you just have no idea. Percents aren't your thing, you don't know how to find it. Is there anything you could automatically knock off if you take a second and look at these answer choices? Okay. 90% would be almost all of them. I have 600 total, only 54 are seniors. So I know that is nowhere near 90%. So check if there's anything that you can eliminate right away. 0.9%, that's pretty small, so you can probably knock that off too. Less than 1%, that wouldn't be the case. But percents in general, it's just part over whole. Your part is your 54, the whole is your 600. The mistake, people do that and they get 0.09 and they forget what to do with the decimals. So that is a common mistake right here. Remember, this is like saying 9 out of 100. So to get your percent, you always take it times 100 or move your decimal 2 spots. So that's where our 9% came from. All right. So strategy in general on those, make sure you know what the question is asking you. That's the biggest thing. You read the word problem and if you don't know what you're trying to find, you're not going to find it. So make sure you understand what the question is telling you. If you don't, look at those answer choices. I can look at my answer choices and see, oh, these are all percents. It's asking me to find a percent. So use those clues to help you. And biggest suggestion, if you have a word problem, it is really hard for anybody, me included, to read an entire problem and just know what to do. Break it into smaller pieces. If you've been in my class, you know when I give you a word problem, do we ever just read the whole thing and start? No, we go sentence by sentence. What is this telling me? What is this telling me? So break it into pieces when you're working through it. Try this question. Let's break it into pieces. On a table of cookies at a wedding reception, 20% of the cookies are chocolate chip. So I know I have chocolate chip cookies. 35% of the remaining cookies are shortbreads. So I have shortbread. Of the cookies that are not chocolate chip or shortbread, 25% are ginger snaps, and the rest are peanut butter. So I had to read it once just to figure out I have 4 different flavors of cookies here. We know there are 200 cookies on the table. So now let's go back and read it again with that information. 20% of the cookies are chocolate chip. Of means what in math terms? What it's telling me to multiply. 20% is 0.2 of the cookies. So times how many cookies are there? 200. So if you take 0.2 times 200, we get what?
40.
So there are 40 chocolate chip cookies. Does everyone see how we got that? Okay, so let's keep going. 35% of the remaining are shortbread. So shortbread, 35%, so 0.35. Of means times the remaining.
That's the most important part of the whole question.
That's the easiest place to make a mistake because you wanted to do 35%.
I tried to do 55% of 200 and I gave the wrong answer because it's not it's 35%.
Right. Where did you get the 160?
I took 40 minus, or I guess 200 minus 40.
Right, because we already know 40 of those cookies are chocolate chip. So if I take those away, the remaining is 160. So 0.35 times 160. How many cookies are shortbread? 56. Okay, of the cookies that are not chocolate chip or shortbread, so of the rest. All right, well we know we had 200, 40 of them are chocolate chip, and 56 are shortbread. So if you do 200 minus your 40 and your 56, we have 104 cookies left. Okay, so using those, 25% are ginger snap. So you could find your ginger snap, 25% of the 104, and that gives you 26. So how many are peanut butter? What would we do? The rest of them have to be peanut butter, so 104 minus 26, and that gives us 78 cookies. So there are 78 peanut butter cookies. Is that the only way of doing it? Absolutely not. But taking the time to break it into pieces, labeling, so I kind of had to keep track for myself what I had, that can help a lot. So I read it once to figure out, okay, I've got to keep track of all these different cookies. The second time to take it piece by piece and do my calculations. Any questions there? Okay. I want to give you guys some practice problems to do. So this section, I'm going